Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway here from the Garrison Church of God. I'm glad you chose to join me today. Our message for this Sunday is called The Weight and the Joy of Discipleship. It's part of my series of the Gospel in Us. I want to talk to you a little bit about this power of yokes. Not yokes like an eggs, but yokes that are put on the necks of oxen. Yokes were kind of an interesting part of the ancient world. It's one of the most ancient instruments developed by humanity. It is still in use in many parts of the world and is essentially unchanged from thousands of years before the time of Christ. So it is quite interesting to realize that this is still something that is still used widely in the world. The placing of a yoke on someone in the ancient world was usually a sign of derision. That was especially true in the Roman world that Jesus lived in when he was on earth. That was part of the struggle for them. By the time that Jesus was born, there was a lot of change that had gone on about this concept of yokes within both the Jewish and the Roman world. Part of that is found in Matthew chapter 11, beginning in verse 28 and going through verse 30. Jesus there is talking about taking upon ourselves the yoke of discipleship, that responsibility to follow after him. What is interesting to me in our present world is there is not really a desire to take upon ourselves the concept of discipleship. One of the things that discipleship requires of us as Christians is that we do the will of Christ, that we follow him, that we follow along behind him. The yoke was not something easy. For the Romans, they had experienced two terrible events in their history where their armies had been defeated and forced to go under the yoke. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in my message today. But there's also the sense in the Old Testament that to have the yoke placed upon you was to be put in a position of servitude, to be in a position of shame, as it were. Jeremiah would speak very pointedly about the concept of being yoked under Nebuchadnezzar. He would say to the Jewish people that you must submit yourselves to the authority and the power of Nebuchadnezzar and wear his yoke. If you do not, God will judge you. And the Jewish people decided not to accept the authority of Nebuchadnezzar, and they were sent into exile. There is this sense of not wanting to be in servitude. So when Jesus said to the Jewish people in Matthew chapter 11 to take upon themselves the yoke, it was a sense of calling to them to accept servitude. We don't think about that aspect of that. We have kind of idealized it and kind of sugar-coated it for our modern tastes. But it wasn't sugar-coated in the time of Jesus. They understood exactly what he was saying. And they understood the demands that would make on their lives. As Christians, there is a demand on our life. It is the Lordship of Jesus Christ. We very often want to pick and choose what we want to do of his word and his authority. That doesn't please me, so I won't do it. Part of what's within each of us is a selfishness, a selfish desire to do what we want to do and to determine the boundaries as we want to determine them. But Jesus didn't give us that option. If we are to be his disciples, we are to accept his lordship. And that means that he gets to make the rules, not us. And that changes everything. It was very popular a while back to say, what would Jesus do? And while I agree with the sentiment there, I don't like necessarily the framing of it, because it leaves it up to our opinion. What would Jesus do? Well, it's kind of my opinion what he would do in this certain circumstance. I would much rather say, does what I am doing please Jesus? When I ask that question, it's a much different question, because it is determining what I do based on what he wants, not what I want. And while there are some things in Scripture that are up for dispute, the basic doctrines of the Christian faith are not. The other thing that is not up for dispute is the basic morality and understanding of humanity that is shared in the Bible. Those things are not up for debate. We can debate a few of the other things around the periphery of those areas, but in truth, those things are not up for debate. Jesus is Lord, and we don't get to make up the rules as we go. We accept his authority. And when we do that, we find that his yoke is easy, his burden is light, and he will lead us to rest and strength. As Christians, that is one of the most difficult aspects of our Christian faith. We often like to talk about grace, and grace is something that God gives us. We cannot earn salvation, but we must commit ourselves to do the will of Christ. That is our calling. It reflects what's really gone on inside of us. Thank you for listening today. I pray that God will bless you, and I pray that you'll have a wonderful day. We'd like to invite you to come and be a part of our services today. Our first service begins at 8:30 at Riverdale at the community church there. Our service here in Garrison begins at 10:30. Thank you for listening. God bless.